How do we equip our families with a biblical worldview? How do we prepare the next generation for life? How do I grow in my walk with the Lord and in my marriage? If you wrestle with these questions, you are in the right place to find answers. Welcome to the Entrusting the Faith podcast. Welcome to the Entrusting the Faith podcast. I'm your host, Eric Rutherford, and today I'm interviewing Rory Groves. Rory is the author of Durable Trades, Family-Centered Economies that have stood the test of time, and he and his wife are the founders of the Grovestead. Two quick items before we get to our interview. First, go to our website at www.entrustingthefaith.com, scroll down to the bottom, and sign up for our weekly emails so that you'll know who is coming up on the podcast for the week and who you may have missed the previous week. You'll also get a free resource when you do. Second, this episode is brought to you by my book, Leading Well at Home, How Husbands and Fathers Can Biblically Lead Their Families. Have you ever thought, I want to be a godly husband or father, but I don't know where to start? Have you ever heard that you need to do something to equip your family, but did not know how to begin? Well, if so, Leading Well at Home will show you how you can love Jesus Christ, love and serve your wife and children, and take responsibility for discipling your family. You'll be encouraged and given action steps that you can apply so that you are moving forward. You can buy it online or through our website at entrustingthefaith.com or leadingwellathome.com or anywhere books are sold online. And you can also get a free excerpt on our website. Okay, let's jump into our interview today. So Rory, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric.
I was excited. I read the synopsis, started looking at your material and thought, man, this will be not only wonderful to learn, face to face, me personally, but the audience as well. So I'm excited.
Great, me too.
Now, before we get to the Grovestead, which I definitely want to get to because it sounds fascinating, what was kind of the impetus for writing Durable Trades?
Yeah, sure. So the Grovestead is basically our little family farm and our little home economy here that we're trying to get off the ground. And when we first moved out here 9 years ago, we were in southern Minnesota. I was a computer programmer and had been my entire career. The impetus for the book was really kind of born out of the experience of moving out into this rural setting, trying our hands at farming a little bit, raising some animals, and then starting to raise our family in a way where our work was really more integrated with the family than what I was used to doing in my corporate job or my cubicle job. When I did the computer work, even when I worked from home, I was always having to leave my family to do the actual work and then, rejoin the family at the end of the day or spend some time in the evenings or the weekends. But when I was here on the farm and we were doing things here, whether it was, fencing animals or gardening or any number of things that we were doing out here, all of that work, which was very real work, and it is real work for many people, the whole family was integrated the whole time. And we were just really enjoying not just the product or the produce of what we were doing here on the farm, but that time together was just irreplaceable. And so I kind of had this contrast in my life as I was going to work to leave the family, but then I was doing a different kind of work where that was uniting the family. And I kind of got to the point where I just started to ask, are there professions out there for people like me who want to spend time with their families instead of being divided from their families in order to do their work? And that was kind of compounded with the aspect of me being a computer programmer and in technology where everything is constantly going obsolete. And anyone out there who works in IT knows exactly what I mean. I mean, every, couple of months practically, but at least every couple of years, there's an entire turnover in computer languages and technology and networking equipment. There's new threats that appear on the horizon all the time. And that vocation, after 20 years of that, I just got tired of the things that I was creating going obsolete so quickly. And so that was the other component. When I wrote the book, Durable Trades, I was really after those two things. Are there vocations where I can put my time towards something that will last and build something that will last? And is it possible to do it together as a family?
That's powerful. The idea of putting your time towards something that will last, but not simply your time, but making sure that it's something as a family you can do together. So is that kind of how you would define durable trades, as something that, sort of lasts the test of time, or lasts much longer than very much the IT and really this almost disposable culture we're in?
Yeah. That's it. The subtitle for the book is Family-Centered Economies That Have Stood the Test of Time. And the idea is exactly that. The average career, or the average person, works 7 careers in their lifetime. That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they change jobs within those careers multiple times. So, as opposed to a situation where you might be working in a multi-generational family business, passed down from your grandfather to the father, to the son, to the grandson, all of these 4th and 5th generation businesses, which were the norm really before the Industrial Revolution for all of history. Today we have a situation where you can't even last 7 years or more in the same profession without completely retraining or overhauling or disposing of what you spent the last 7 years creating. And so, you're exactly right. The disposable culture that we live in today really lends itself to just a high amount of turnover and a lot of job dissatisfaction, because people find themselves in these very disposable positions. And, it's not to say that work isn't meaningful. It is, but you can sense that if you're creating something that's going to be around for a while, it has a different feel than something that is going to be thrown out after the next invention comes along.
That's true. And there is something about, whether it's building, whether it's forming, whether it's growing, a variety of different things, that long-term aspect, I feel much more satisfied, at least, in knowing that it's going to be used. It has purpose for at least a long period of time, or a longer period. Whereas I know there are some things I work on that it's for today, and in a month it's done. And it's like, okay, that didn't really make much difference, or at least it doesn't feel that way.
There's a tradesman I interviewed for the book. He was a sawyer. And then we interviewed him for the chapter on Sawyer lumber milling. And he said he was very much like me. He worked full-time in IT, and he spent a summer building a cabin up in, or I should say, refinishing a building, a schoolhouse into a cabin in Wisconsin. And he spent the whole summer tearing apart these walls to rebuild this century-old schoolhouse and to remodel it and so forth. And he said when he tore the veneer off the walls, the planks off the walls, he found a signature of the man who built that structure. And it really stunned him, because he said, here was a building that I was repurposing and going to continue to use here 100 years after it was built, and autographed by the man who built it 100 years ago. And when I write a line of code, it's already dead by the time it hits the hard drive. In other words, it's already obsolete. He knows that everything that he's building will barely last. And that really made a mark on him. And he ended up actually buying a professional grade lumber mill. And now he does lumber milling and sawmilling as a part-time profession for him. But that's just kind of some of the contrast about kind of knowing and feeling that the energy and your time that you're putting into something over the period of your life, is it contributing to something that's going to last, or is it just going to get thrown out?
Wow, that's a strong example. That's a challenging example for me, just in legacy building, in terms of looking at your family and looking at what kind of legacy you want to build, but at the same time, the very work that you were doing. Because sometimes I know I forget that the Lord created work before sin came into the world. It was the sin that made the work hard and unpleasant. But we are made for work and for labor, but trying to do that good kind of labor, that lasts. You talked
one thing I'd just chime in on that comes to mind as we're talking here is that, the relationships, any time that you put into relationships, are eternal. right?
Mm.
They're lasting for eternity. And so if you find yourself, and in my case, I was looking for kind of work where I could work together with my family. And it wasn't so much whether we're building an old schoolhouse or, doing something that will last on the earth for a long time. I mean, that has merit too. But if I'm building relationships with my sons and daughters and my wife, those are eternal. I mean, that's eternally significant. And there's nothing more durable or worth putting your time into. As a Christian, there is really nothing that's going to matter as much as those relationships. So to me, it's kind of a dual purpose thing. You're both creating stability in your family and permanence in the world, but there's also the relationships which go beyond that.
It's true. And that's something, me personally wrestled with, through COVID. I've been fortunate enough to, my day job I'm working from home, where I was not before. I was commuting, 2 hours and change, total, an hour in, hour and 15, hour and 20 back, and missing not only the work time at home and being around family, but then the commute time as well. And always, sort of like, I need to do something different. And the Lord sort of changed that, at least temporarily. And so, that's been nice as we're looking ahead, talking with the guys, and, they're on the road, 5-6 days a week. And it's like, man, you're missing like the important stuff. Like that job eternally doesn't matter. Like what your family is exactly what you're saying.
I mean, the way our economy is arranged right now, the family really is competition to corporations. In other words, the corporation would prefer to have as much of your full-time attention as possible. And for that matter, so would Hollywood and the entertainment industry and the sports industry. I mean, all of these different institutions are really arrayed to, and you think about it, to divide the family. They have segregated entertainment programming, right? Kids programming, adults programming, men, women. All of these things are really dialed in to try to maximize your attention as an individual. There's very little out there in the modern culture that is trying to reinforce the family and trying to build and create deeper relationships between each other outside of the church, really.
That's true. I had not thought about that. Just thinking about focused attention on an individual level and not doing anything at all with the family. I had not thought of it in that way, but that's absolutely true.
When Jesus said that, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, when he says that the two shall become one, that's our clue that God views the family as a complete unit, right? As an inseparable unit. It is not part of God's design to have the family split apart and to spend most of their waking hours apart from each other. That's completely opposite of the idea of cleaving together and becoming one flesh. And the same transcends into your children, bringing up your children, having them with you so that you're able to disciple your children as you're rising up and as you're lying down, as you're walking by the way, and as you're coming and you're going. You're teaching the laws of God to your children. And how are you going to do that if you're commuting and working 60 hours a week away from your family? How is that going to happen, right? Someone else is going to have to step in and do that for you. Or it doesn't happen at all. And so God's heart is for the family to be unified and to be together. And the reality is, and we haven't gotten into the book too much, but historically, that's how it always happened. And for 1,000 years, for 1,500 years or more, really, that's how Christianity was spread from generation to generation. It was families in the family-centered economy, or the home economy, that were reinforcing the bonds of relationships. And they were not only working together, but they were passing on the faith, and they were mentoring, they were discipling as they were working. Because that's the true thing that happens while you're working together, right? You're modeling your faith, you're modeling who you are to your children or to your neighbors in your community.
It's true. It's not simply the skill set of the work that you're doing, though that is something that is learned and passed on, but it's those conversations,
right,
as you're going. It's the being able to have those Christ-focused conversations about life, about creation, about God, about why we're doing this, about his beauty in the world around us. All of that fits together. It's that very much that mentoring kind of thing, not simply, again, work related, but like you say, it's faith related, it's family related.
Work is just the context, and what I believe is an ideal context, but it's a context for passing on the faith. So it happens as you're working, as you're walking by the way, as you're swinging the hammer, as you're laying the brick, as you're putting up the structure, or tending the animals, or whatever the vocation is. If you're doing it together, there are those opportunities to be discipling your children.
I like that. And that is true, that as you go and just bringing them alongside. I was having a conversation with a friend last night, and that was something he was talking about. Is he has 5 boys. I've got 2 girls and a boy, and we're in about the same age range. And that was something he was telling me, is like he's now helping to bringing his sons along as they're, of age and as they're able in whatever they're doing.
Yes.
And so it was a good reminder to me that I need to make sure I'm doing that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say even if your children have no aptitude or interest in the actual vocation that you're practicing as a parent, absolutely teach them what you're doing. Teach them your trade, because you know the trade and you love your children. And so you're the perfect person to mentor them. To that point, like if a father is maybe a carpenter and the son doesn't want to go into that line of work, teach them how to build, right? I mean, they're probably going to learn it anyway. I don't know if you'll have any carpenter who's not going to rope their children into a building project. But the point is, teach them what you know, so that at least they have that skill, because you're the best one to teach them that. And chances are, and the historical norm would be, that they will pick up that trade, and you'll be an ideal mentor to help them kind of smooth out that transition from coming out from under one home and establishing a new home.
That's an excellent point too. It's helping them through that transition, because that's ultimately what we're called to do, right? To become an adult, to move out, to have our own job, our own work, our own family. And so I think right now we seem to miss that step. It's like you're supposed to grow up and then you miss that transition. There's no formal transition to make that smooth. And what you're talking about would help tremendously.
Well, we delegate it now because we specialize. This is what we do in modern economies. We specialize. So we have experts that will take care of the transition period, which we generally consider to be college, right? So if you find the right college, or you find a good professors or what have you, they'll do the job of transitioning and preparing your children for life. But that's a job that God gave parents. They're the ones that really need to take the lead on that, whether or not they involve higher education or not. That transition, you are uniquely gifted both to train your children in the faith, but train them in the work and train them for life. That is the calling that is parenting. And God has put that on every parent, and he's enabled you. Don't surrender to the experts, right? You are able to do that. You're able to educate your own children. You're able to take them to work with you. You're able to prepare them for life. You, as virtue of having these children that God gave to you, you are able to do these things. You don't have to rely on specialized experts to do it for you.
That is true. And that's one of the things, because we homeschool. And so one of the things that we wrestled with early on, and I think many homeschool families, always ask that question, am I doing it right? Am I doing it well? But we've been doing it now for, I'll just call it a bunch of years. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. In that very same breath, it was that idea of, we will do it well because people have been teaching their children for, hundreds and hundreds, since Christ, since before. It's just what you do, right? And they learn from you, just like they learn how to eat, they learn how to dress themselves. like you say, spending the extra time with them,
Mm-hmm.
that's priceless. It
Absolutely.
really is.
Yeah, we homeschool as well too, and it's been really wonderful for our family. Both my wife and I were raised in public schools, and we decided to homeschool, and it's been such a rewarding experience. And yeah, I would completely agree with what you said. You as parents are able and capable, and you're actually the only ones in the world that God chose to educate those children. If you think about it, if he wanted another set of people to educate those children, he would have given it to them. So you do have the ability with God's grace to raise them up, not only prepare them academically or prepare them for life, but to prepare their hearts and their souls spiritually for what God wants them to do in the world.
That is absolutely true. One thing that fascinated me, well, many things about the book fascinate me, but you talked about, and you mentioned a little bit ago, that specialization idea. And so you talk some about complexity and specialization and how that's sort of been inverted. And I know we've sort of touched on that a little bit here. How would you describe that or elaborate on that a little bit and what the effects are?
Well, I assume you're kind of referring to the illustration of the pyramid, the inverted pyramid. So we have, in a stable society, and for most of human history, we had what you'd have as a broad base of a society working in first sector activities, which is very close to the land. So farming, raising animals, forestry, mining, the kinds of things that are just raw extraction of resources from the earth. And on top of that, if that was the base of the pyramid, then on top of that, you would have manufacturing, right? So people who take the raw materials, turn it into something useful. And then as a third, at the top of that pyramid or triangle, you would have the services industry. Those are people that are facilitating a lot of the higher level, so banking and education and scientific endeavors and some of those kinds of things. And they're a smaller portion, right, as you go up the triangle or you go up the pyramid. And that's how it's historically been. I forget the exact percentages. I could try to look it up quick, but you have something like 80% of the society, or maybe 70% of the society involved in first tier, first sector activities, and fewer and fewer as you get up to the top. And you have an inherently stable society that way. Today, and that's how our society was circa 1633 to 1800. Today, that triangle or pyramid's been inverted, where we have 2% of the population involved in first sector activities. Just a tiny minuscule portion that are feeding and providing the raw materials for the rest of us. We have a very small manufacturing base as compared to what we had historically had even 50 years ago, and a massively huge services industry, right? I mean, everyone is involved in banking or healthcare or sales or a lot of these tertiary sectors. And then we also have the quaternary sector, which is the knowledge workers, and that's on top of that. So you have all of this other base of society that is resting on this minuscule portion. And what that really means is that we're relying on the rest of the world to supply a lot of our raw materials, a lot of our manufacturing. And as we found out during COVID, and as we're continuing to find out in the aftershocks, is that if that supply chain gets disrupted, it really upsets the entire society. So, I mean, you go to the grocery store and you can't find food, or in the case right now where there's not enough meat in the store shelves. So there's skyrocketing prices for meat and different food products that sometimes go scarce. That's because we're not inherently making our own materials anymore, extracting our own materials. So that is kind of a way to kind of illustrate that it's really a fragile, I believe, setup where we are prone to have problems continually as things get disrupted because we don't have enough people involved in these primary sector activities and in these manufacturing activities. And there's a lot of talk lately about redomesticating manufacturing, right? China's making so much of what we need, and we really got into a bind over that over the last year and a half. And so there's talk about, bringing manufacturing back, and Trump was trying to do that. But these things, they take decades. I mean, it didn't go away overnight, and it's not going to come back overnight. You have to build the manufacturing capacity for a nation. It takes decades. So there aren't any short-term fixes to this. I'm just merely pointing out the problem in an effort to say there are opportunities for individual families to begin to reclaim stability in their lives. I mean, of course, farming is one way to do it. You can grow your own food, and that insulates you from the shocks in the supply chain as it pertains to food. But that's kind of the long-winded version of the illustration. I summed up with many fewer words in the book.
No, but it was eye-opening too, because even, you think about not only the stability of the family, but the stability of the marketplace, the stability of the economy is kind of like what you were talking about. As you begin delegating too many things away, whether that's work, whether that's manufacturing, whether that's farming, whether that's whatever, you lose that stability. And I thought it was a really fascinating point that really kind of made me ask, what am I doing? What are we doing as a family that we can, sort of bring things back in-house, if you will? I can't remember the number of trades you list in the book.
Yeah, 61 in total.
61 in total. And you also have them in different categories, right? So was there like a top 20 and then the honorable mentions?
Right.
So can you kind of give a quick breakdown of how did a trade make it to your list, and what put it sort of in the top, or what was an honorable mention?
Sure. I'll just clarify our previous conversation.
Oh, yeah,
in
please
1900, I just looked it up. Approximately primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors of the economy. So that would be your agriculture, your manufacturing, and your services industries were about 30% each.
Okay.
In terms of the distribution of employment in 1900. Today, or in 2010, we have less than 2% of the workforce employed in agriculture, less than I think we're somewhere below 10% in manufacturing, and a good 60-70% in services, and about 15% in knowledge worker activities. And so just that difference between a 30% base down to a 2% base is a really, really significant shift demographically for a society. And it really hasn't been that long. For 300 years, we were working much closer to the land. And just in really the last 100 years, we have shifted way more rapidly into higher levels of the sector. And it continues to get more specialized the further we go. So circling back to how is the book divided? So the way I did this is I wanted to research what trades were durable, what trades were available to someone today. I know that some trades were historically durable, but what's still durable today after the Industrial Revolution, right? Because that was the great upset. That was the watershed event in human history, is what some secular historians would call that, because it upset so many societies and it created so much upheaval that really there's kind of a pre and post Industrial Revolution world that we're still walking out. So what I did is I looked at all the trades that were around before the Industrial Revolution that are still around today. And then I made a list of all those trades. I came up with a list of 61. So they've survived for at least 230 years since the founding of our country, because roughly 1790 is roughly when they established the starting point for the Industrial Revolution. And then I rank them, because like we had talked about earlier, I didn't want to know just what was the most durable, but also what's the most family-centered, because I wanted to do something with my family. And I wanted to know what kind of income you can earn and how hard is it to start a business in that trade. So I came up with a number of criteria to score each trade, and then I ranked them in the book in order from most durable, most family-centered to least. So the ones in the top 20, so to speak, are basically the durable trades. They've stood the test of time. They make a livable income. They're very family centered. And then the ones that are at the bottom of the list, the last 10, for example, they're still very durable in the sense that they've been around for a long time, but they may not be very family centered, or they may be very difficult to start a new business in or very expensive to start a new business in, but still they make the cut as an honorable mention.
So the top 20 are really the most family centered. You can make a living at it, family centered, durable, still from from before Industrial Revolution to today. For everybody listening, can you name off 2 or 3 of those? Are there some
sure.
that are your favorites, or you like most, or found most interesting? What did you?
Well, yeah, the one thing I'd say is in the top 20, what's most interesting is food, fiber, and shelter rises to the top on this list.
Really?
In other words, the trades that are catering to core human needs, those are the ones that not only prove to be the most resilient over time, but they're also the most family-centered. And I kind of find that interesting. So you have things like butcher, shepherds, of course, carpenters, I've already mentioned that, farmers, cooks, people who prepare food, and innkeepers are in there. Even language interpreters have been incredibly durable going back to roughly, the ancient Egyptian empire. Many of these trades, most of these trades that are in this book, if they were around in 1790, they were around in 2000 BC as well. I mean, they're incredibly durable trades, and then all likelihood they're going to be around for a long time to come.
That is fascinating. I know I just want to encourage everybody listening to definitely check it out, because we don't think, just sort of in our day-to-day life, I know those types of things have never really popped into my head as like what has lasted, what is something, because we all, we hear numbers like, oh, we don't even know how many careers and how many jobs are going to be that haven't even been invented yet that are going to happen in 10 years. And so hearing that there's things that last is very powerful.
And the thing I'd chime in on that too is we have roughly 30,000 occupations to choose from today. In 1790, we had about 70. So think about that.
Wow.
So if you were a young person being raised, right, in around the time of the Revolutionary War, you had a pretty good handle on all the possibilities that you could go into. You knew people working in them. You had the opportunity to see what they look like long before you ever went off to get a college degree or work a couple of years in the trade. You had a sense of what these were doing and if this was something that would be a good fit for what you felt called to in life. Today, I mean, you just don't know. This stuff changes so rapidly. There are dozens of professions invented every day. And the other thing that's very interesting is that so many, if not, almost all of the professions that were spawned by the Industrial Revolution were eventually destroyed by the Industrial Revolution. It has that creative destruction aspect to it, where it's constantly reinventing a better way to do something, a more useful and a more efficient way to do something. And that necessitates destroying old professions which did not have that level of efficiency. We tend to look at things about, whatever is new and novel, but I'm saying, let's look back to the past, look at the old paths. These are novel right now because they have stood the test of time. And I may add, they're not necessarily low-paying jobs. Some of these are incredibly lucrative positions, which I wouldn't advocate that as a sole reason to pursue a career. But some of these professions, especially right now during this kind of season of uncertainty that we're in, there is so much demand for trades and people who know and have these manual trades skill sets that you can hardly even find contractors to work on your house or, to do these things without paying an arm and a leg.
It is true. It is. We are going in that direction. It's just becoming more and more, and more and more difficult to find. Let me transition just briefly to the Grovestead. And you talked a little bit about starting it. What was it like when you made that transition? Because you career IT person, which I can respect. I've been in marketing and data. But then you acquired a farm, you started raising animals, you started doing some farming. What was that like?
Yeah, we definitely approached it as a hobby at first. It was a quintessential hobby farm, even down to the honeybees. And it was a gradual process. We've been here 9 years, but we did have a strong drive. I especially had a strong drive to learn how to become more self-sufficient. So that was really driving us. I wanted to learn how to grow my own food and how to tend animals and raise animals for food and just be closer to the land, I guess, if that makes sense. I was raised in the suburbs and we lived in Minneapolis before we moved out here. I just kind of had this desire to have some more space and to be able to kind of be more in tune. I think sometimes in the city, you can really be out of tune with nature because everything is air conditioned or heated, and you have roads and sidewalks, and it's almost like nature is boxed in on these city street boulevards. But it's not wild in any stretch. You get out in the country a little bit and nature is allowed to be wild again. And I just wanted to be a little bit more close to that in God's creation, just to experience it. And so what happened was I didn't really think my vocation would change all that much. I just thought I'd keep this as a hobby. But really what happened was there was something incongruent about the way I was working and like the things that I was pursuing to earn money, which was high technology, and the fulfillment that I had from working on the land. And I couldn't quite shake it. Yes, we wanted to be more self-sufficient, have our own food, and kind of regain some of these skill sets, these homesteading skill sets. But there was also a way of life and kind of a pace of life that was very gratifying, very fulfilling. And as I've already talked to, very unifying for our family. I mean, we can point to so many things. I'm looking out the window right now at our barn, and we can point to so many things on this property. And everything that's here, we did it together with some combination of the family. And so that kind of thing just drew me more and more into considering farming and shepherding and some of the other types of things that we've been doing here. As I should mention that the Grovestead is, we host workshops on homesteading topics, and we've hosted like summer camps and different types of things too, to try to share this experience with others. That's part of our heart too. And so that's kind of a gradual process and a journey we've been on. I still do technology consulting, but it's a very, very limited part-time basis. As much as I'm able to, I'm investing in our farm and the Grovestead side of things.
So you had a vision for where you really wanted to be, and then you just began that gradual process of going in that direction. But it sounds like very rewarding, not only doing things as a family, but being able to have those faith conversations day in, day out, learning skills day in, day out. I'm sure giving your kids, I'm sure have benefited greatly from it. Just that competency kind of aspect of, hey, I help build a barn. I know how to raise animals. I know how to fix a fence. Is that true? It seems like that.
Oh, there's such a broad base of knowledge transfer happening here. The funny thing is that my kids, they're so much further ahead than I was at their ages. My oldest is 10, and I built a cabin when we first moved out here because we didn't have enough space in the house for me to have like a dedicated office. So I built a cabin. It was my first building project. I was 35. And it was the first time I used power tools. I not use them, but first time I bought a set of power tools. Mm-hmm. I tepidly used some borrowed power tools from time to time before that. But, I was typical in the sense that I always hired out the work that I didn't know how to do. I didn't spend too much time trying to learn it. So anyway, I kind of taught myself some basic carpentry skills building that cabin. My son was 9. He's 10 this year. But when I wrote the book, he was 9, and he was using power tools, and he's building his own little shanties in the woods and tree forts. And it's just really neat to see. And my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, goes out with my wife every morning, and we milk 2 goats. We have some Nubian and Toggenburg goats. And so we get all the milk supply that we need from them. But they go out every morning and they sing and they have a good time. Now my 5-year-oldest daughter is starting to join them as well. And so these are just the best way to describe it is to use an agricultural analogy. But when something's growing in the soil, especially like a tree, like an oak tree that takes a long time to grow, it's shooting these roots out, and it takes a long time for those roots to get established. But once those roots are established and they're strong, that tree can really weather any kind of storm, and or a lot of storms that it normally would not with a weak and shallow root system. And it can also bear much fruit. And so it's kind of like when people ask me, how did we get from here to there? It's been very gradual and just putting down one root at a time. And a lot of times it's just the grace of God. We're just trying to follow what we feel is on our heart, praying that God would lead us. And then we're just taking a risk in one direction and seeing where that goes. And then just slowly building one thing after the other. So yeah, there's an immense amount of knowledge transfer, I guess you should say, but it's more because my kids are learning from my mistakes, because I'm doing most of the stuff for the first time anyway. So they're learning from my mistakes, but what a neat experience. I mean, talk about life school, right? Talk about education. So they're going to use this information for the rest of their lives, and they're going to have this to fall back on if they're ever interested in going in a career in this direction. They'll have a great exposure to it. But even if they don't, it's just a really rewarding experience, and it's been really good memory making the whole time.
That is true. And it reminds me too, both with your family, you're stepping out in faith, you're willing to take risks, you're willing to learn. I know how I am as I'm trying to learn things, and we're in the middle. I just ripped out some cabinets Sunday and trying to move some things around the kitchen. I sort of know what I'm doing, but we're going to be slow and we're just going to learn it.
Great.
And
That's it.
But it's one of those things where I think sometimes I'll just say, especially guys, we sort of get caught up and we get afraid and we aren't willing to try things. And so it's really encouraging to hear, it's like, hey, I grew up in the suburbs and we just made this transition, and you're just going for it, right? You're learning as you go, and that's powerful. And that teaches your children a lot too. Mm-hmm. Just, hey, I'm not exactly sure, but we're going to figure it out.
You got to take some risks, you take calculated risks. Don't quit your job and go buy an alpaca farm sight unseen. But you do need to take some risks and show your kids that you can take some risks in life. That's okay. And what I recommend in the book too is successful businesses, they had mentors. And so if there's a direction that you want to go, whether it's farming or into some of the trades or something like that, I highly recommend people find a trusted mentor who you can either go to work for and actually learn while you're working and get paid to learn, as opposed to, paying a tuition fee somewhere else and then find out after you get your certificate that you don't actually like the work. That's a bummer. But yeah, if you can find a mentor, because the things that you're describing, I encounter that all the time because I don't really have any mentors for what I'm doing. I have some generous neighbors that will help me on occasion, but a lot of the stuff I'm learning, it's all first generation. And so it's very difficult and intimidating to do that. But my children, it's not first generation for them. They have a mentor in me now because I've been blazing that trail. But if you can find someone, I highly recommend, anyone, even in young people and old people, if you can follow someone around and help them on a job and pick up a bit of the expertise that way, that really removes a lot of the intimidating, overwhelming experience of trying it, your first time and then having to run to YouTube to try to figure out how to undo what you just did. YouTube doesn't necessarily make the best mentorship.
No, it's good you can troubleshoot, but that is true. It is. I love that finding a mentor in job, in faith, in the church, building those relationships so that you're learning from other people. I would highly encourage, I appreciate you sharing that too, because I think sometimes, especially sometimes even we're afraid to reach out and try and find help. We just assume we can't do it and, keep moving. This has been a wonderful conversation. I know we're coming to the end of our time here. If listeners want to know more about your book or about the Grovestead, what you guys are doing, where would you like them to go?
Sure. They can come to our website at thegrovestead.com. And we have, the book is available anywhere. So you can get it at your favorite bookstore. You can order it online. We have coupon codes on the website. If we find out about the book being sold at a discount, we post it on the website. So go to thegrovestead.com for that. And then we also have, if we have any upcoming events, they'll be posted there, as well as we write a quarterly newsletter for Christian families. And the goal of that is just to try to share what we're learning in building a new family economy. So this is kind of the mentoring from a distance. But we try to include everything that we're learning about self-sufficiency and homesteading, as well as more reflective things we're learning about work and life and family and faith as we kind of live this out on the farm. So anyway, all that you can find at thegrovestead.com.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure for everybody listening, I'll make sure that information's in the show notes so you can access it. Definitely check it out. Not only the website, the materials, the book. This is good stuff. This is stuff we need to hear and listen to and consider. So, Rory, I really appreciate your time today. This has been wonderful, not only for me, but for the audience as well.
Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it too.
Wow, great conversation with Rory. A few things that jumped out at me. First, building relationships with our spouse and with our children, it's eternal. They have eternal significance, and nothing is worth more than those relationships, except our relationship with Jesus Christ, that they have that much value. Second, that family is in competition oftentimes to the corporations where we work. The family is also in competition with entertainment. And so we need to be cognizant of that in what we do, the careers we pursue, and how we go about our lives. And third, God views the family as a complete unit and desires it to be unified. And you pass along faith as you work together, modeling it as you go. So great conversation with Rory. Check out his website, the material, all that's in the show notes. I would encourage you to read it, check it out. It is good stuff. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a review for us wherever you listen to podcasts. Doing so will help others to find us. Check out the show notes for resource information. We encourage you to do that for links and other references. We'd like to hear from you, so you can message us your questions or comments on Facebook, Instagram, at Entrusting the Faith. You can email us at info@entrustingthefaith.com. If you go to our website, which is www.entrustingthefaith.com, you can sign up to our email list and receive free resources as well as upcoming podcast episode information. So check it out. Lastly, just remember, legacies are built a day at a time. So start now.